So we're excited to invade all of your privacy with these incredible presentations. So the idea behind this panel, and one of the things that I think is really important, is thinking about the depth of change, as I was talking about earlier, in the way we build businesses in the physical marketplace. And so one thing we really wanted to do, we wanted to show some examples of not only how technology can augment the way we run our business, but actually change the very foundation of that. So what we're going to have is we're going to have a few companies up here. Kyle from Indochino, he'll explain what he's going to do, what he does. But Indochino is a custom apparel company, and they've built a really, really interesting model, both around how they create fabric, but also how they do the measurements and how they think of their retail strategy. Next, we'll hear from Stan at GrubHub. GrubHub, obviously, one of the very interesting things that's been interesting to me about someone who's really listened to their calls a lot and their earnings calls is that one of the really, really important kind of shifts for GrubHub has been going just from kind of paper menus and kind of digitalizing that to actually expanding the pie, so to speak, of delivery. Last will be Greg from Reserve, and he'll be talking a bit about how Reserve has built some new payment infrastructure into restaurants, and how that can change the way restaurants operate. So I wanted to start with Kyle. Everyone give him a round of applause.
Thanks a lot. All right. Can everybody hear me all right? All right, so as the intro went, my name is Vucko. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Indochino, and I'm going to talk to you today about the company that I founded 8 years ago, one of the first into the space of vertically integrated e-commerce. And really what we do is we make it easy for a guy to get dressed. A guy can come onto our site from anywhere in the world and pick a garment, suit or dress shirt, customize it, measure himself with the help of a friend, and then swipe a card and he's done. He can also do the same thing through one of our 5 retail outlets, which we just opened over the last 6 months. Either path you take, we then build the garment in out of our facilities in Shanghai and deliver it to your door in the world's fastest 4 weeks or less. And I always find it funny when I get invited to speak to these things because I'm not a technology guy by background. I'm actually not someone who stays very current on what's going on in the industry. And what I think's made us unique is because we haven't done that. And we are very much a technology-enabled company, and we've been known consistently over the years for being a disruptor and a leader in the space of apparel, vertical integration, and distribution. But it's all been for a pretty unique reason, or seemingly unique reason, and that's been our focus on building our business around, in our case, guys, but really building a business around the customer and following where they'll go. And so really what I'm going to do is just spend the next few minutes walking through our journey and the learnings that we've had and the technology we've had to use or create to get there. But all of it's been centered around guys and helping them look good. So the business started when my co-founder and I were in college. We needed a suit for a conference, never bought one before, and really had a terrible experience. The stuff that we loved, we couldn't afford, or we couldn't get in a smaller town in Canada, and the stuff we couldn't afford just didn't resonate with us. And we found that we were either on the 6th floor or the basement of a department store or in the back corner of a boutique. And the realization we had was this concept that men were second-class retail citizens, that shopping was designed around women. And so what we decided to do was we would build a clothing experience around men. And really the core of our business would just be helping them look good and helping them be confident and get dressed. And so we came up with these 4 kind of macro things, that guys were looking for stuff that fit well, that was stylish, so resonated with who they are and their lifestyle, that they could afford, and ultimately was convenience, so they could get in, get out, be done. I mean, it's no surprise that guys don't love shopping. And we backed into this concept of Indochino, which initially was custom clothing via the internet. And we found actually, we didn't set out to build a custom clothing company or one that was online only. It was something we backed into because we felt it was the best way to solve these kind of 4 things of fit, style, value, and convenience. You could get something that fits you with custom style. You get to customize it and build it to you. value by cutting out the middleman. We could offer something that was typically inaccessible for a fraction of the price. And then ultimately convenience, you could buy from anywhere. And you could do it at home in less time than you could buy off the rack and get it altered. And so, I mean, we did a bunch of innovative stuff way back then around building our own web platform, because everything we do is in-house. Really focusing on brand and using the web as a branded property as opposed to a conversion property. One of the things, if you're less familiar with us, is we ask everybody to measure themselves. We had to create this process, which was initially a human process, but as we've scaled, has actually become a very data-centric process. We have over 140,000 clients globally, so based on your weight and height, we toggle an ever-learning algorithm that we can actually guess your measurements just from weight and height alone to about an 80 to 85% accuracy. And as you put in more measurements, within 4 or 5 measurements, we can actually guess the rest of your measurements. And this is perennially getting better as we go. So that was the front end of the business that we created, and there was definitely technology involved. But we also then had to figure out how to make this stuff. So the first 3 years of our business were I was actually living in China. No one had done mass customized apparel at any sort of scale. This is something we learned once we got funding, luckily. And we had to build that from scratch. And so what started as a few home-based tailors ultimately ended up being about a third of our 100 staff are based there, and we're now actually one of the largest mass customized apparel manufacturers on the planet. And in order to do that, we've had to create a whole slew of unique supply chain management tools, quality control systems, all sorts of interesting stuff. So as an example, we have iPads on our quality control line that we actually toggle and check stuff as we go, because when you're mass customizing garments, the level of rigor you have to do on quality control is infinitely higher than traditional apparel. So we actually had to design tools that could scale, capture the data, et cetera. So from there, back in 2010, it's old news now, and hence the original iPhone 5, we were first into mobile. And this is not exciting now. Everybody does mobile, but at the time, we actually built our own mobile site, and it was something that we've won a ton of awards for this, but it wasn't something that we set out to do. We weren't trying to push boundaries. All that we saw was back in 2010, guys started checking email on their phone. And so we built a platform that could support email browsing, and then we created a platform for just repeat customers, and then actually much more recently, existing customers. But we actually guided our way into mobile, all based off of what our customers were doing, nothing kind of that we saw externally. More recently, in 2011, we actually made the decision to jump into retail. What we were finding is, despite our growth, there was a lot of guys that were asking for help with measuring and getting style. There were guys that wanted to see and feel fabrics, and despite our best efforts to solve that through mailing samples and free tape measures and offering fit promises and guarantees, ultimately we backed into traditional retail. So we spent about 2 years traveling all over North America. We did about 30 events globally, or 30 events across the continent. Guy would come in, pair him up with a stylist who had an iPhone or iPod Touch, and we would go through the entire web process one-to-one. It was an iPod Touch app that we had created that we would actually capture all the info really seamlessly, measure yourself, get measured with the partner, and then you'd be done. We had huge success with this. It grew our business for about 2 years. A lot of media and publicity that came out of doing these short-term events. You inevitably get into the challenges going from an online business and all its wonders of efficiency to an offline business, which is filled with people hiring and all the complexities that come with traditional retail, and doing that on a temporary basis, which was very difficult to execute when you were getting to 2 events a month. So what we decided to do back in July of last year is actually move into full-bore retail as a way to solve this. So now we've got 5 locations across North America. We're opening another 5 this year, and it's been one of the best decisions we've made as a company. We're actually the first apparel company as of 2011 and since our evolution to go from online only to offline. And we're excited about where this is going to go. Omni-channel is probably a term everybody's heard to death. And we're really familiar with it, obviously. But what we're really getting excited about is just where the customer is going to go next, and actually how do you build a business around that? It's very easy conceptually to understand the importance of being where your customer is and building a business around that, and being in all the channels equally effectively. But to actually build a business around that, where you have guys in your stores that encourage customers to buy online later, and they somehow get incentivized for that. or otherwise is very difficult. And so where we've been challenged and where we're pushing forward now is really actually how do you get to the nuts and bolts of the structure? So how do you structure a P&L to support that? How do you structure incentives? And then ultimately, where do you get the tools to support that level of tracking? I mean, we actually haven't been able to crack this yet, as much as we'd like to try. There are tools out there, but in our case, I mean, we're a medium-sized company, venture-backed and growing a lot. The tools that actually work we can't afford. And so really, we're building it ourselves and hacking it together. And what we found is ultimately the best way to solve this is to enable the company and to support them culturally. So we've actually given up on a lot of tracking and metrics. We've actually given up on, at least in the interim, holding people accountable to certain standards or numbers, and really focusing as a group on, are the service experiences and the expectations and customer management in the right place to support the outcomes that we want. So, things like doing what's best for the customer, even if it means telling them to leave, or even if it means firing them, or encouraging them to buy later, which are all cultural initiatives, which I think we can get away with as a smaller company relative to maybe something that's already more established. But that's the only way we've actually been able to find to solve effectively leading an omni-channel retail and online combined environment, and still deliver a great customer experience. In the end, actually, I'm really excited to see where this goes. I mean, we've moved into full-line retail, and we're going to expand. We'll probably have 20 stores by next year and growing. But my assumption is that the model is going to continue to evolve as our customer evolves, and I'm excited to see where that goes. Anyway, thanks a lot.
Well, good afternoon. Nice suit, Kyle. Figured I'd give you some props there since it's probably one that you made yourself. Well, anyway, good afternoon. I'm Stan Chia. I'm the Senior Vice President for Operations at GrubHub. And I'm really excited to come and talk to you guys today about this concept of disrupting brick and mortar. I think as a company, we're very uniquely positioned to do that. And we've got a great case study that I wanted to share with you guys today. So just kind of to start us off with a very, very obvious fact, right? 99 out of 100 people want better food faster. You're not really going to find, people who say, I want it slower and I want it to be crappier food. But what's interesting about wanting it is that as we move into this millennial generation, millennials not only want it, they actually demand it, right? And so, when you look at some of the statistics that we track on a regular basis, you'll see that, as of this year, for the first time ever, we've seen that spending on dining has actually overtaken spending on groceries in-house. Very, very largely driven, again, when you look at the research, by millennials who believe that taking out food is a much, much bigger priority for them and something that they're willing to spend money on. I think the NRA, and I think our friend from the NRA is here, the Buns Not Guns, right? Buns Not Guns, I heard you earlier. That they said that when they surveyed consumers, a third of them today say that takeout is an essential part of their lifestyle. So we look at this, and at GrubHub we said to ourselves that diner patterns, diner habits, they're changing, and as they're changing, how do we help work with our restaurant partners to actually evolve with the change and adjust to what the market is looking at? The restaurant space is an interesting one traditionally when you think about barriers to entry. It's a heavy fixed cost business, right? And you look at it and you say to yourself, man, I have to just start a restaurant. I need anywhere from $300,000 to $500,000. I look at the stats on a success rate perspective, and man, 60% of restaurants don't make it past the first year. 80% go under in 5 years. And you look at what that means. When a restaurant goes under, everything's gone. It's all lost, right? You can't recoup that cost. You've bought tables, you've bought chairs, you've printed out menus, everything from the decor. It's gone, right? So there's a huge barrier to entry for budding restaurateurs, and that's something at GrubHub we were looking for a way to help kind of disrupt that space and help these entrepreneurial restaurateurs. What did we have to focus on? Well, fixed cost in itself, when you think about it, is something that's just not flexible, right? It's fixed. And so we said, how do we actually allow some flexibility in this realm of fixed cost? We said, let's figure out what a concept of a virtual restaurant is, and it has to be more profitable for the restaurateur. it shouldn't have to rely on prime real estate. When you look at the real estate cost of setting up a restaurant, having prime location is key. Little risk to turning over a new concept and eliminating the need for the front of the house, associated costs with wait staff. We said this virtual restaurant could be something that was run out of a kitchen on a platform like ours where we have the diners with a delivery-only capability, allowing for restaurateurs to come in, test concepts, be extremely flexible in terms of, hey, today I'm trying tacos. Guess what? Tacos didn't work. I'm going to do General Stan's chicken tomorrow and see if diners buy that. No fixed cost to overturn, and something really, really flexible that they can do that our platform can, again, help them do with the diners that we have. So I'm going to share a case study with you shortly on what we did with a renowned chef in Chicago, but just wanted to give you a quick overview on GrubHub if you weren't familiar with kind of who we are and why we thought we were uniquely positioned to address this challenge. Founded in 2004, been around for 11 years now, and we've done, I think, upwards of 250 million orders. So we've got lots of insights into dining patterns, restaurant patterns. We've got a network today of 35,000 restaurants. We process on average 235,000 orders a day. So we really do understand kind of what's going on in the space, what diners are doing, what restaurants are doing, and just data around this concept of how do we help restaurants and how do we really provide a really great experience for diners at the same time. We think data is going to drive a lot of this when you think about it. And again, when you look at our scale, there's kind of three facets of data that we think will be very, very beneficial to budding restaurateurs. One is diner preferences. So by market, by region that we're in, we know very well, what people order the most often, what they don't order at all. On average, if you're going to have a quesadilla, what does that cost in the market? Do you price yourself at a certain point? Do you want to be premium? We kind of know how that looks across that, and we can give that kind of data and advice to budding restaurants. We also know from a neighborhood perspective, what are the best hours? Where do we see order volume spike? In Chicago, if you're in Lakeview, is it better to open your restaurant from 5 to 10, or is it better to open your restaurant for delivery 6 to 11, right? So we have the data that, again, helps them from a neighborhood perspective. And then from a market perspective, as national type restaurants are looking and they're saying, hey, what cities should I go into? Is there an appetite for this cuisine? We have that data that does that. We combine that with the platform that we provide our restaurant partners with OrderHub, and we give them what we feel is best-in-class technology that helps them manage the kitchen flow, the order flow, and now as we move into delivery, the last mile of logistics as well in this space. So on to the case study that I'm really excited to share with you guys. So meet Ben. Ben Shigren was the executive chef of Hopleaf in Chicago, a renowned restaurant. And he really wanted to do his own thing. He stressed, I've got a passion for Midwestern modern food, but I just don't really have the capital to go in to invest in a restaurant of my own, and there's a lot of risk there. So he came to us and he said, I would love to test a concept of a virtual kitchen with you. So we worked with Ben and we said, great, we know exactly where there would be great spots for you to set up a location for a commissary kitchen. We knew that the Loop in Chicago is a spot where there's a lot of lunch-only restaurants, and so the kitchen space was available for rent over the weekends. And so we said, hey, these are prime kitchens for you to utilize, and we planned for 2 weekends in April where he went in with a menu. We also helped him kind of look at the menu and say, hey, we know you've got a passion for things. These are items that do really, really well. Maybe these are things you want to think about. And as we did it, we opened for business. And the first week, he sold out of all his food, right? Everything that he had, he sold out. And we went back with him and we looked at all the data that I just talked about and we said, what was the rate of his food that was being sold? Where could he have tweaked his supplies a little bit to do something perhaps slightly different? And we adjusted for week 2. And when we went into week 2, he doubled his order volume for the week, sold through everything again. With a slight tweak that we like to joke about, he was really passionate about this beet salad with blue cheese, and it just wasn't selling that well, and he had all the ingredients in his kitchen, and we said to him, Ben, when we look at the data, really, beets and goat cheese go a lot better together. And he said, okay, reluctantly swapped it over to goat cheese with his beet salad, instantaneous shift on our menu, and sold right through it, right? So, again, I think having that data and just being able to work with these guys was exciting for us, and it was a really successful concept for Ben. So in summary, we look at the future of the takeout business of the restaurant space, and we think, again, that with the platform that we have, with the data, with the massive diner network, that we're really in a position to disrupt the space. And we think that this is just one example of what we've done to kind of say, hey, the traditional brick and mortar model, we've got another alternative to it, and we're going to continue to experiment in that space. Thank you very much.
Hey guys, give this a go here. My name is Greg Hong. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company called Reserve. It's funny, Stan had a few of the restaurant metrics up here, which we're gonna have a little bit of overlap on, but it's actually probably gonna be all good. So, quick update on, so Reserve is a dining concierge service. We focus on making every part of the dining experience better. That's both for our restaurants and for our diners. We want to make every one of the interactions that you might have as a potential diner with one of our restaurants the ideal interaction. And that's really our goal at the end of the day. So before I kind of jump into kind of the themes that I want to talk about for kind of small business and how kind of what we're doing is going to change that landscape, I want to talk about the restaurant industry as a whole. When we look at the restaurant space, $709.2 billion, that's the expected amount of restaurant sales this year across all restaurants. That accounts for 4% of the US GDP. I think what I'm trying to show here is ultimately that restaurants are a huge part of our economy, right? 14 million people are currently employed in restaurants in the United States. That's 1 in every 10 workers. And we have 1 million restaurants in the US. If you look around, probably the person sitting next to you, either you or the person sitting next to you has worked in a restaurant at some point in their lives. Restaurants are really the foundation in some senses of the thing that we as humans do most routinely. We go out to eat. And one of the things that, before I jump into these metrics, that I think is so interesting about us going out to eat is, in a lot of senses, restaurants themselves will be, in my mind, the last form of live entertainment, right? You look at all the other forms of entertainment that are out there, and they're all getting digitized. It's going to be really hard to digitize that hamburger from Shake Shack or, the In-N-Out Burger in California. It's going to be really one of the last forms of things that when we as humans go out, that's what we're going to be going out for is food. When we look at restaurants, though, they are still small businesses at heart. 7 in 10 restaurants are a single unit operation. So we're not talking Olive Garden here or Cheesecake Factory. We're talking, Mom's Corner Diner, and a lot of times those small businesses are really family run, family oriented, and so forth. 9 in 10 businesses that are in the restaurant space, sorry, I'm losing my train of thought here. So 9 in 10 restaurants that are 9 in 10 businesses that are in the restaurant space are actually under 50 employees. So when you look at small businesses and the restaurant space as a whole, that's really what restaurants are. They're small businesses. And 8 out of 10 of those restaurants were started by somebody that had their first job in the restaurant space. So fundamentally, when you look at the space as a whole, it's a lot of these restaurateurs that have really said, okay, great, I love the space. I have a passion for food and a passion for really making sure that people leave my business happy. And that's really what small business is at the end of the day. I want people to come into my business. I want them to have a great experience. And if I deliver on that well, they'll come back again and they'll share it with their friends. So fundamentally, when you look at what restaurants are and kind of what they're facing, they've got, in a lot of cases, they're undercapitalized as we kind of were talking about earlier in this panel here. But I think the idea behind that and where that becomes important is many of these restaurants are struggling to adopt technology. In the last 20 years, you have restaurants that have gone now from pen and paper to point of sale systems that are still archaic. A lot of them are running on Windows 97. You walk into some of these restaurants and you're like, how is this actually working in this fashion? And the reality of it is that it's the people themselves that are actually running the restaurants. And they rely on the technology when they have to, but it's not really a focus and a core competency of their business. And functionally, on the flip side of that, you have many diners that are saying, great, technology in restaurants makes my experience easier, more convenient, and I'm more likely to go out and order food, whether it be online or go to a restaurant in the first place if I can get that and use technology to make that happen. On the flip side of that, you have these restaurants that are saying, okay, we don't know if we necessarily want that. At Reserve, we have more than 200 of the nation's best restaurants. And when we look at that experience, you talk to so many diners and they're saying, do I want a touch screen next to my table, so I can actually order from the table? Or do I want to actually have that human-to-human interaction where there's an element of hospitality? We talk about, this experience of wanting to have people leave your business happy. Well, so much of that is the actual people that are making that a reality. So one of the themes that we're really focused on at Reserve, and we are seeing really across the space, is this element of discovery. You know, the restaurants that are actually saying, okay, we're going to embrace technology, we're going to get ahead of the competition, and we're going to say, you know, we're going to deliver something new and different to our diners in an effort to improve the level of hospitality that somebody might experience when they come into our business. One of the things that our restaurants are saying is, okay, we have all of this wonderful data. We have these wonderful photos. We want to share them online with people. 70% of the people in this room will actually check out an online menu over the course of the next year. So as you start to look at that, how do we create these profiles that are really rich for the restaurants and so forth? As we talk to our restaurant partners, they say, how can you help us get our favorite dish out there that's really popular? How can you help us share that? You have so many restaurateurs that are pushing out into social, which honestly isn't a concept that's all that new for many businesses. But for restaurateurs, these people are saying, okay, for the first time, we're going to push into social, and we're going to make a concerted effort to try and share what our business is and get our diners to actually share that with their friends. And that's what we've seen at Reserve. We have many of our diners that are actually going online. They're sharing the experience at the end of the meal. We have these wonderful check as paid cards that people are actually publishing out, which has been a huge win not only for us, Reserve, but it's also been a huge win for the restaurateurs. You know, for them to be able to have a channel where we can help them push their brand out to their user base, it's been something that's hugely influential to them driving new business. Which leads us to kind of my next point here. For us, payment is a big part of what we're hoping to innovate on in the restaurant space. I think we've all been through that experience before when we go out to eat and you're either fighting with your in-laws trying to figure out who's going to pay the bill, you fumble around for your wallet and it's awkward. You know, and it's no better on the restaurant side. They've said to us, and many of those restaurateurs have said, how can we make this experience better? We don't want to have this awkward interaction. We want to invite people into our homes and make them feel like they're guests. And now instead of at the end of the experience where we slide the bill across the table and say, hey, hope you had a good meal, now pay us, how do we eliminate that altogether? And that's something that we as a company have said, okay, if we can work with our restaurant partners, maybe we can set everyone up like as if you were to have a house account. It's better for the diner, it's better for the restaurant, there's no awkwardness on either side, and everyone really wins in that entire experience. You know, and it's these small changes like this where we talk about improving interactions between a diner and a restaurant, where we're hoping that the technology that we pull together helps facilitate those interactions. It's what the restaurants look for when they talk about hospitality, and it's what we're looking to ultimately help provide to them. They're our partners at the end of the day, and they've told us what they want. If we build the tools that they need, ultimately they'll be in a better spot, and so will we. The last piece, and it's a big theme for us that we see quite frequently, is how do the restaurants themselves improve on these customer relationships? It's so fundamental. Again, it comes back to the same concept of wanting to have people leave their restaurants happy. You know, at every step along the way, we see an opportunity for us to improve that experience. So you think about, you know, you see the old TV shows, Cheers, and you walk into the bar, and of course, everyone knows your name, right? So what's our version of that? How do we take the technology that's out there and help a restaurant have a photo of that diner that might only be coming into the restaurant for the first time? If that restaurant can then greet that person by name, all of a sudden, the experience from the diner perspective goes through the roof. They feel like they're a regular, even if it's only their first time in the restaurant, and the experience is better on both sides. Granted, you can carry that too far. You could think of the situation where I, as a server, might come to your table and say, hey, I know you really like that 2009 bottle of Bordeaux that you had last week over at Flower and Water. Well, that starts to get a little creepy, right? So there's that balance of how do you do it thoughtfully, and how do you use that data in the right way? How do you allow both sides to opt in to really improve that experience? But fundamentally, that's what we're after, and we think that ultimately that's one of the changes that we're going to start to see in the space, is how do restaurants get better data and use that data in a way to actually improve the customer experience, make it stickier, and make people want to come back again. You know, it's funny, one of my team members said to me earlier today, I went to a coffee shop, and I go to the coffee shop, and functionally, I'm standing in line, and you know, you're probably 10 people deep in line, and they'll tell you, oh, okay, I already made that for you because you get up to the counter and they see your face every day. There's something that's very real about that makes that experience sticky. And that's the same kind of information that we're actually hoping to provide our restaurant partners. When done and used in the right way, actually improves that experience. So those are kind of the things that we're targeting and we see across kind of the industry as a whole, is really this big business that's really cash strapped. And they're saying, okay, great, we're going to implement technology, but we want to do it in the right way. You know, there was an old anecdote that I heard from a friend of mine. He said, at the Four Seasons, if you've ever shown up to the Four Seasons before, you'll get there, you'll pull up in your car, and the bellhop will say to you, okay, great. So is this your first time here at the Four Seasons, Mr. Smith? Oh, yes, okay, great. Well, we're happy to have you here. He'll then take that information, he'll hand an envelope with information about your car and so forth, your license plate, to the person behind the counter. The person behind the counter will then say, okay, great, well, welcome to see you again, or welcome here again, Mr. Smith, if you've been here before. And the way they do that is they actually pass an envelope to the person behind the counter. If the envelope is open, they know that you've been here before. If it's closed, they know that you haven't. So what we see within the space is, how do you take this technology and use it in a way where it's not, again, that counter-side kiosk, but especially at these higher-end restaurants, use it in a way where it can be really thoughtfully done, where you can take that technology and it's not ever present in front of your face, but it's used in a thoughtful manner by the server, by the manager, to deliver this wonderful experience. So that's kind of what I wanted to loop you guys in on today. With that, I will kick it back to you.
Is this hot? So great. I think that, you know, I think that touches on a lot of what we're talking about in terms of the themes, in terms of the vision of the future. And I think a lot of us who work in the technology industry and who understand some of the capabilities that can happen when you have buy-in from the various parties, it's pretty incredible. One of the things that I do want to talk a little bit about is the challenge as a technology company, because you are not, you know, I think one of the advantages for you, Kyle, was that you were taking the technology and you were building the product, that you owned that entire vertical line, so you could create these technologies and implement them without having to go to a merchant, convince them it was useful. And there was a point-of-sale company a little while ago, I'm not going to say who, developed a great new product that asked people to kind of come in and order ahead of time. And one of the problems was that you can't lead, there's only a certain amount you can lead from behind. You're relying on these people to understand how to use the technology to deeply change their business. So Stan, I just want to ask you a little bit, when you guys think of, you know, because that actually expanding the delivery market is part of your story you tell investors, it's part of the investment thesis, how do you think about convincing businesses and the tens, hundreds, thousands, millions of businesses out there that are on your platform, how do you convince them to really change not only between technologies, between pen and paper to online, but actually how do you convince them to actually change the way they operate as a business?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two kind of real themes that we work on that I guess when you think about it are pretty straightforward. One is our technology will always have to strive to make sure that it is actually simplifying the experience for them, right? So in terms of what we enable them to do, the technology has to make life simpler versus making it harder. So that concept of, you know, we've always said outwardly that our biggest competitor when we think about what we're trying to do is actually that menu in the drawer, right? We're trying to go up against that. For us, our total addressable market from a takeout perspective is 70 billion, not including the chains. And we look at ourselves doing 2.4 billion in gross food sales. We're less than 5% of the market. So we're really trying to say, for restaurants where that menu is out there, we want to make it easier to do business against that.
Is it case studies, and Greg, I think you guys probably have the experience too. Is it the success stories that convince people that it's worthwhile? I mean, these are really different behaviors than what all of these people grew up in the restaurant industry knew how to build a business.
Yeah, you know, for us, it's really been about how do we actually work with them as partners. They've had so many companies that have come into their restaurants and said, oh, we're going to build this really great product. By the way, it's so focused on consumers that it's not going to help you at all. You know, for us, it's this two-sided marketplace. You don't just have the diner that you're trying to please. You have a restaurateur that is running a business at the end of the day. If you build technology that makes their job more difficult at the end instead of easier, and really something where we take a step back and say, okay, is this improving the experience you're delivering? If it is, then that's the sale point for them. That's what actually gets them interested. They've been burned too many times by what they feel like is tech that is not helping them. And that's really the core of it for us, is how do we build things that they want?
Was that one of your decisions about going to the higher end restaurants, that they might be more forward thinking in terms of?
Yeah, I mean, it was twofold. One, they had decades of experience doing this, right? So, you know, being able to learn from them as we said, hey, what should we build? You know, we were able to take cues from them to actually figure out what the most important things to them were to build. Then to go just build them, it made it a lot easier to then go resell it back into the restaurants and of their kind. The second part of that was actually getting these tastemakers on board, these major restaurant groups behind it. Once we've gotten them on board, they've said, okay, great, let us share this with other people in the industry and help them understand that you guys are in fact trying to make this a better place for us as it relates to technology.
Great. Well, I think we're out of time. I want to give these guys a round of applause, and thank you.